Okay, my name is Reinout van Rees. Last year I explained something about the Django admin interface. Basically just that, you can read it on the documentation, but it's an enormously long page, and I showed basically visually everything that's possible with the Django admin. And then, well, hey, I want a search bar. Okay, I know it's possible, then I can go look it up in the documentation. Aiming to do the same with models and querying and searching for stuff in your database today. I work at Nele Schuurmans in Utrecht, so I had to take the bus of 6:45 or so tomorrow. Anyway, so I'll show you what's possible. You don't have to remember every detail. What I'm going to tell you is in the Django documentation. So just remember that something is possible or that something might be a good idea. I'll use a time registration system as the example. Who here in this room made a time registration system for his own companies? Okay, yeah. I wondered where all the 50,000 time registration systems on GitHub are coming from. Everybody builds his own one. But during building this, it was a very relational model, and I had to learn a lot about the Django querying mechanism to make it fast. Who here works with Django or has tried it? Wow, okay, fine. So I don't really have to explain the models and the fields, etc. Well, in the core, Django has a ORM, the Object Relational Mapper. You write in Python code your models and fields, and Django understands it, knows about it, and can translate your Python code, where you do .filter or .all, into really, really well optimized and safe SQL code. So it maps between the SQL database and Python. Yeah. Well, this is a part of the data model for that time registration system. So you have persons and projects. You can book on a person can book on a project. So if you book, okay, I work 10 hours, you get one new booking object. And then you think, oh, I work 12, you get another 2 hours in a separate booking object. So you get a lot of objects. And persons have a group, can be a member of a group with a name. This is, you don't have to remember it, but then you know where all the examples in the code are coming from. Query parameters. I'll switch to some live coding. It should work. It's just the admin. Nothing should crash. Normally I don't do a star import, but in this case. On the right-hand side, you've got the SQL logging. So every thing I type in that results in an SQL statement, you see a lot of output on the right-hand side of the screen. You don't really have to look at it, except when I tell you to, but then you know what it is. So this is the simplest one, person.objects.all. Yeah, you see some select statement on the right-hand side, and I get a lot of persons back. Well, basic filtering, group is ID 1. Well, yeah, I only get one back, but normally you want to do more. I don't remember all the IDs of every group or person in my own database, so I want to search by name. under name. This will be familiar to most. You then follow the group foreign key to the group object, and then you take the name. Okay, now I've got my persons, which are a member of the group, called systemen, but there's also some, what was it? Beheer en onderhoud, or something like it, group. I don't know the full name. So I'll do an I contains. So the name of the group should contain, in this case, characters, and in this case also I, case insensitive, contain something with onderhoud. Ah, yeah, I'm there. So the query worked. In this case, I'm using SQLite as a backend database, and it even works without an I, because textual searches in SQLite are case insensitive. So when I prepared this presentation, I spent 5 minutes wondering, hey, why does this query work? In the same way, there are more things like instead of contains, you can do, let's take just a person. Name starts with. Hey. Starts with, hey. I find myself ends with persons. Normally a group is filled in, but some people don't belong to any group. So how do you query for group being none in a database? Well, group is null. Is true. Okay, I find a couple. So yeah, there's a whole list in the Django documentation what you can do and what Django in general can translate to whatever database is behind your project. So you don't have to worry about little difference in SQL. Okay, this is the easy part. Yeah, we saw filter. That's what I use most. I filter out things. But you can also do exclude. It works exactly the same, only it removes those items from the results. So that might sometimes be easier. Like, okay, I want to filter. I remove everything that's null. And it can also be more readable. You can do multiple filter statements after each other. I'll show it to you all in a minute. What you also should remember, now you should start watching the SQL screen, though what comes out of such a .all or .filter is a query set in Django terms, and by default they are lazy, which means, hey, I've got a query set, and I'm not doing anything to the database unless you apparently want some output from it. I'll show you how that works in a minute. You can use that for some readability tricks. So that last query that I did was for people where group was null. I get quite a lot of persons. Oh, there are a lot of persons who used to work for the company, but they're not active anymore. So I'll exclude the ones with archived as true. Okay, now I only get a few. If I had stored this query in a database, in a database. If I had stored this query in a variable, so good plus persons is, I'm not going to press enter yet, clear out the log, enter, nothing happens in the database. I mean, I haven't done anything with it yet. If I start printing them, then you get a query. So we now have our group plus persons, and then I'll do the same, exclude archived is true. Yeah, and we get the same short list of persons that we saw earlier. Only, well, if I start making a really long query, it gets unreadable. But when I explain what I'm doing by just giving it a variable name, putting it in a variable, your code can become much more readable. Yep. So you can do group plus persons dot exclude, okay, but that would be active group plus persons. Starts getting long, but if you have to explain something that's really complex, it can help you later on when you have to read it. Yeah, and a good tip, you don't need it all the time, but start with the model that you want. If in the end you want a list of persons that booked something for a certain group in a project, don't start, okay, let's first grab the projects and then work our way up in that single query, but now you want persons. And then with a couple of filter statements, slowly build up your query, perhaps do it in the Django shell, and then you can see what you're doing, add a count all the time at the end to get a feel for, okay, how many people am I getting back? Am I making mistakes or not? Is the amount expected? And then you can create quite complex queries without getting lost. Speed. There are two big tricks you can do. One is with select related and prefetch related. In a relational database, if I were to grab a list of persons, and then wanted to print person plus group. But group, yeah, that's in a different table. So Django, ORM has to do another SQL query and another SQL query. And select related and prefetch related are two ways to handle it. Select related does a big join in SQL, so you only get one set of results. And prefetch related does only a query for the person database, and then Django figures out which IDs it needs to grab from the group. I'll show you in a minute. Which of the two is best depends on the situation, and then not for every kind of relation the select related is available. And the last one is use values instead of objects. I'll clean this up. Yeah, so I'll grab the start filter group. I'll grab all the persons that belong to the group systemen, and then for persons, I'll print the name of the person, and I'll get a group name back. Sorry, person.group name. Person.group. Yeah. So on the right hand side, yeah, here you've got the big query of, okay, give me my persons, and then, well, how many? 20 or 15 identical queries for every person. Okay, what's the group and what's the name? The solution is to add a select related, and then you give the field, in this case the foreign key, group, and I'll do the same print and clean this one up a little bit. So you get a big query with there's an inner join somewhere here where it takes where it also grabs the group, and it's the last one. I'll do a prefetch related. And you get two queries. So in this case, Django figured out which IDs it had to grab from the group table. But still, in each of these cases, Django had to do an SQL query and convert those results into Python objects. But if I only need the person's name and the group name, it's much less expensive for Django to just return those two things to me. I'll do the query directly now. You can do that by saying, okay, I don't want the objects, I want the results, so the values. And that was per the name and group under name. And I'll try and make it a little bit visible. Yeah, so you get a list of dictionaries. So per item you get a dictionary with the group name and the name. And the query on the right hand side is a little bit shorter because it only needs to grab the name of the person, the name of the group. It doesn't grab all the rest of the items and doesn't convert it to a Django model. So that really helps with making it a little bit faster. For 20 persons, it's no problem. But once you have a database with 10,000 or 100,000 items, this helps a lot. There are a couple of variants. I mean, now you get a list of dictionary, and every dictionary you've got that same group name. Well, if you know what you're going to get, you can also say, okay, I forget about the dictionary, just give me the list of a list with two values. Values list. Okay, you don't get a list, but you get a tuple, the ID is the same. So you don't get all the extraneous dictionary stuff, which normally is handy, but if you don't need it, if you're only requesting one item, like a list of IDs, for instance, or just a list of just a list of names, you can say, okay, flat is true to the values list call, and then it will don't give you back lists of one item, but just the items. So this is very fast and perhaps much easier to work with in the rest of your code. That was the select related, prefetch related. Time is fine. Gets more, magical, weird, with annotation aggregation. SQL databases, you don't need to grab all the data out of the database and do all your calculations inside your Python code. The database is built to do summing and aggregation and lots of calculations in a very optimal way on large data sets. So when possible, let the database do the work for you. So I'll show a bit of annotation and aggregation and the difference. And last, that's a bit of a weird syntax when you first see it in Django, but you can do some group by tricks with values and then an aggregation. You'll understand it probably when I show it. So the booking object has a relation booked by to person and booked on to project. And on a person you can say, okay, give me the bookings, and then you get all the bookings. So booking.objects.filter booked by, then you get to the person, and then group name is systemen objects. That's something I always you notice that I'm quite quick at doing book by group name. That's practicing. Practice with your own data model by just playing around with it like this for an hour. You'll understand your own data model better. You'll remember all the names better, and it's fun. It's just fun. So now I've got all the bookings of the persons from the group of systemen. The booking object has an hours field. I'll just want the total number of hours they've booked. So I'll aggregate it, and I've forgotten something, from Django.db.models import sum or average or count or min or max. So I'll aggregate with sum on the field called hours. And it's a decimal field because I don't want hours, and I don't want rounding errors in this case. But it's 126,000 something hours booked by everybody in the group systemen. Okay. But what if I want to know per person how much he booked? Then person.objects.filter group name is system. And then I'll aggregate, so it makes the grand total, so you get one value out of it. And annotate, okay, I'm now getting back a couple of persons, and I'll annotate, so I'll add an extra field to every person with the sum of bookings under hours. Forgotten one, yeah. Okay, I still get back the persons. I'll just grab the 10th one, which has a bookings hours sum. He booked 9,000 hours. So he has. I annotated it, and the object got an extra bookings hours, because that was what I asked for, and because it's a sum, Django by default appends under sum to it, or under average, or under max. For those details, you really have to look into the Django documentation. Okay, what does it do? What are the defaults? How does it work? Once you get the hang of it, yeah, it's nice. So that's the difference between annotation and aggregation. And now the group by magic. I got a question from my secretary last week when I was making this presentation. I want everybody who booked hours on maternity leave, so zwangerschapsverlof, and I want to have their hours per year. Okay, yeah. So I started out with the bookings, objects. You are paying attention. Filter booked on. So the project booked on is the project. Dot under name. What was the description? Not the name. Description. I contains is zwanger. Input error. Okay. Yep. So I've got a lot of bookings, and then I want to group them by person and year. Okay. To do that, I ask for the values. Booked by another name, so it's the name of the person who booked. And booking has a link to a year-week object, which has years and week numbers in it. So year, week, under year. So I just get the year. So booked by someone in 2013. Okay, so that's the grouping that I want. And if you have such a value statement, and then after the value statement directly puts an aggregate, some hours, an annotate, sorry. It will do in the SQL. You'll see a group by statement, and then on those groups, Django does annotates those groups with the result of the sum. So you have Adam Mulders in 2016 booked nothing, and somebody else booked 500 hours. So this is the weirdest part for me of the Django syntax, Django query syntax. But when you think about it, it is a little bit logical to work in this way. So again, this is really something for the documentation, but as long as you know it, this is all in the database, and it took 25 milliseconds. So that's pretty quick. This is the weirdest one, but these are the kinds of things you can do with the Django query language, and it's pretty quick. Sorry. Well, read the documentation now of the overview. Try to make your queries readable. You can make your queries readable, or you can make the life of your colleagues a mess by not doing it, but try to name your queries once it gets beyond 200 lines of characters on one line or so. And practice with your own code, so toy with it. That's it. Nobody here? Okay, theoretically it is also time to go, but I'll stay a little longer. Yeah, there's a wrap. Oh, 16:30. Oh, no problem. Yeah, questions? Okay, the question is, there's a way to, is there a way to name your annotations instead of having Django put under some? Yes, there is, but I don't remember anymore. There is a way. It's in the documentation. There is a way. Any more questions? Because I took our real database, but I of course couldn't use the real names. So Factory Boy, that's a testing library for Django. There's a faker library for it, which fake company names, telephone numbers, etc. In different languages. So I just iterated over all the person names except myself and gave them a fake name. So it's, but in reality, yeah, there are a couple of our male colleagues who also took maternity leave to take care of the kids in the first case. So yeah. Any more?
You did not mention Q queries, and I sometimes use them, but if you're not mentioning them, do you have objections to them?
Whether I use or whether I have objections to Q objects, no. Q objects are basically what you put inside, so the group under the name is. You can, that can also be, you can create it also with a Q object. I'll show the syntax. So from django.db.models import Q. And then Q group name is, I hope it works, yeah, query. And so you can create such a part of the, you can create that in other parts of your code base. I have a search filter function in my user interface which spits out a list of those Q objects. And then I can say person.objects.filter. So you can do it programmatically in that way, and combine them and do ands and ors and other weird stuff that you cannot get done with the normal syntax.
That's just what I wanted to mention. In my experience, I use Q for or, because it comes with an or with a normal filter.
Yeah. Yeah, what he said, you cannot do an or with the normal filter syntax. So if you want, I want people who are either in the systemen group or have had maternity leave, then you have to use Q objects. But yeah, the fun thing starts when you do it programmatically, like, okay, somebody typed in something somewhere in my user interface, so I'm going to construct some Q objects and then just feed them to the query. There are more of those, yeah, programmatic tricks. The recent Django versions support making your own aggregation and annotation functions, and also the under starts with under I contains. You can also write your own versions for it. So if you have a weird database or some very custom need, even that's customizable now. I haven't done it yet, but any more? Okay, thank you. I'll just take my own present.